Welcome everyone to the eMedica GP Training 2025 Next Steps webinar. So for those that haven't met me before, brief introduction. My name is Muhibur Rahman. I'm a portfolio GP based here in Birmingham and Solihull. My clinical roles include being a partner in my own practice. I cover 2 different community detox units. I've held various other roles in secure medicine. Used to be one of the GPs at a secure unit for women with significant mental health illness. I've worked with the Royal Army. I've worked in global and humanitarian medicine in deployments in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Greece, Bangladesh. I'm a consultant in medical education, so a lot of my time now is in teaching. I help doctors to get into GP training, to get into other specialties, to get through GP training, MRCGP, and I work with various organizations like the Medical Protection Society and various deaneries. And we've been supporting GP trainees here at eMedica now for over 20 years. We've trained over 82,000 delegates. So what we are going to cover, we're going to cover some important things about your offer, about what happens after you accept your offer. We're going to talk about rotations in GP training, key things you need to do before you start training. I'll provide you an overview of the structure of GP training for the 3 years and the 3 parts of MRCGP, when you can do what, when, and important changes that have recently been announced. Okay. I'll also talk to you about how our GPST Plus course on how to maximize your GP training, which is a full day course aimed at people about to start GP training or who are already in ST1, that will help you make the most of every rotation, be really prepared, know exactly what to expect, know why people run into difficulties, how you can avoid it, but also some of the things that are really important now that it's really competitive to get jobs once you qualify as a GP. There's things you can do during training that will make you more competitive when you qualify. The days of, as long as you've got CCT, you're guaranteed a job as a GP, they're gone, okay? It's very, very competitive at the moment. And then there'll be a dedicated Q&A at the end. So that's what we're going to go through. Let's make a start. Before I do, just want to say a huge congratulations to you. You know, this is the most competitive year ever. Over 20,000 people applied for GP training this year for those 4,000 odd jobs. Over 15,000 were ranked. So, you know, I know how incredibly hard you must have worked to get an offer. So, you know, well done. And sometimes you can get lost in all of this paperwork and there's a lot to do and you forget to celebrate that hard work and that success. So, you know, it always makes me so happy to see people who are passionate about GP, that have worked hard to get the reward that they deserve. And, you know, this year it's been harder than any other year to get any offer, never mind to get an offer in, you know, one of the top areas that you want, which a lot of you have achieved. So, you know, huge well done on all of your hard work and it's great to see you succeed. Okay, so let's get into this. So in terms of the basics, the deadline has passed for upgrades, and beyond that, the deadline has also passed when all offer details have been passed to the individual deaneries and lead employers. Now, once that happens, each deanery has their own process and timeline. So what you'll see is there's some people who have already been allocated their rotations. There's some people who have been asked to choose, and the deadline has passed for them to choose. There's some people who have been asked to choose, but they've still got time to decide. Some of you haven't received any information yet. That's because each deanery has got its own timeline. Don't worry. There's no need to panic. That's completely normal. In some cases, it can take several weeks before you will hear from your deanery, okay? You will get a whole load of emails, some from your deanery, some from your lead employer. Please read the information provided in each email carefully. Generally, there will be either a contact number or contact email for any queries that are specific to that deanery or that lead employer. I'm going to cover things that are common and some of the things that you need to be aware of, but there will be some questions that the only person that could answer it is your specific deanery or your specific lead employer. And you've all got different lead employers and different deaneries, okay? You can ask in the GP training support group, you know, our Facebook group. There might be someone in that deanery who has already maybe gone through that and may be able to give you a specific answer, okay? But any queries specific to your deanery, contact them, okay? So if you want to know where to get hold of the contact for different deaneries, this is the main GP recruitment website. Again, my colleagues will post a link to this, okay? At the bottom of this page, if you scroll down, there's links for every single deanery. And when you click plus, it will give you the contact details for each deanery. That's who you can contact if you've got specific queries for your deanery, okay? So let's talk about rotations then, all right? Let me ask you first, what do you think is the most important non-GP rotation to do as part of your GP training? And you can put anything down, but I'll launch a poll for you to maybe tell me what you think. Pick your top 3, okay? Don't pick more than 3, but pick your top 3 from this list. And then if there's anything else, you can just put it in the chat. Okay, great. So I'll tell you the most popular ones that people have picked are A&E and Peds. More than 2/3 of you have said that that's one of your top choices. After that, obstetrics and gynecology, followed by medicine, then psychiatry, then ENT, eyes, or dermatology. The others had fewer people. Okay. Now, it's actually a trick question because there isn't any rotation that is the most important universally. What's important and what will be beneficial is different for each of you, right? So we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of ranking rotations, as I mentioned, it's a deanery specific process, all right? So some of you have already been allocated, some of you already selected, some of you are selecting, some of you will be selecting soon, some of you will be contacted later on. There might be some terms within them that you're not familiar with. So let me go through what they are. So you might see ITP posts. ITP posts are innovative or integrated training posts. Sometimes they're called DSPs, dedicated skills posts. Basically, this usually means you have a split week where you spend part of the week in a GP practice, part of the week in hospital. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 60-40. Again, the specifics of that will be different for each deanery. So in some deaneries, when you're in the hospital part of an ITP post, you will be on the on-call rota. In some, you won't be taking part in the on-call rota when you're in an ITP post rather than a pure hospital post. Okay, that's different for each deanery. I think that doing this type of post is really good because you get overall increased exposure to GP. And by spending some time in GP and some time in hospital, you can often link what you're seeing in hospital straight away with the patient that you see in GP and see the benefit of learning that. I did when I was doing GP training, I started GP training in 2004. They were just starting to introduce this. I was one of the first few cohorts that they had this. In fact, I applied to Neath Port Talbot in South Wales, where I did my GP training, specifically because they had this type of thing, because I'd done lots of different things in hospital beforehand, and I liked the idea. And so I did 1 year where I was half in GP, and then I did 4 months, 4 months, 4 months, where the other half of the week I did musculoskeletal medicine, by the end of which I was, doing clinics, learning how to do joint injections, things like that. I did dermatology, and I did emergency medicine, but without being on their rota. So I didn't have the horrendous nights and lots of weekends. I did the odd weekend to see it. I did one night, but mostly I could pick, decent hours for my shifts. And so I got the benefits of emergency medicine, where you're getting to see lots of things and different things and do some practical things. But without, normally the downside of emergency medicine is that the shifts tend to be horrendous. Okay. So I found that really helpful. But each week I was still getting some access to GP as well. Then you might see some posts which are HEFT or trailblazer posts. So HEFT stands for Health Equity Focused Training. Okay. Again, the specifics of these will vary locally, but generally HEFT or trailblazer posts will be either areas of high deprivation or increased needs. So for example, they might be working with specific populations, homeless patients, patients in the traveller community, patients with additional needs in areas of economic deprivation. And within that, there's additional learning that goes alongside your GP training that you have to do. And they warn people that if you're going to take a HEFT post, it's got additional challenge. So that's something for you to consider. Okay. And in terms of ranking and preference, again, this varies by deanery. In most cases, you'll do your preferencing on Oriel. But in some cases, the deanery will ask you to fill in a form or send an email in to them with a ranking of your rotations. Something that is important for all deaneries is to rank all rotations. Sometimes what people do is they think, oh, I'll only rank 2 or 3 that I really want. I won't rank the rest. If you do that, you're going to, in a lot of cases, just be allocated randomly from any of the other ones. Okay. At least if you rank all of them, the ones that you least prefer, put them at the bottom. But if you just leave some unranked, you can still get them, but you'll have no choice as to which order that they're going to allocate that. Okay. So let me show you an example of when it's on Oriel, that sometimes you see it looks like this and you think, oh, what does all of this mean? So 2 things that you can do. The first is if you click it, often it will give you additional information about the specifics of what does that mean, because this code could mean anything, right? Sometimes they will send you an Excel with a list of, what does XYZ1, it relates to this. You'll have GP1, then medicine for GP2, if you do XYZ6, then that you're going to have this one, this one, this one. If you do this one here, you're going to do ortho, then GP2, and so on. Okay. In some deaneries, they don't use Oriel for this. They will send you a list on Excel, and then you will fill in a form on their website or complete preferencing on the Excel form and send it back. Again, there will be instructions that you just need to read it carefully. And if you're unsure, because this information is deanery specific, contact the deanery. Remember, the contact details are on the main GP recruitment website, which we posted a link to earlier. Okay. So how do you rank rotations? What are the things that you should think about? There's a couple of things that I recommend. Think about things that you either lack exposure in or lack confidence in. So let's say now you have already done lots of peds. If you've done 2-3 years of peds, doing 6 months extra or 4 months extra of pediatrics as part of GP training, you're probably not going to gain much from it. You're not going to learn that much new beyond what you already knew. You will learn different things that you see in pediatrics as a GP in the GP part of your training. But if you've never done dermatology, you might benefit from that a lot more because we see a lot of skin conditions. If you've never done psychiatry, you're going to see a lot of men's health, women's health, a lot of psychiatric problems. Whatever you lack exposure in or confidence in is probably worth getting exposure to. The other thing that might be worth thinking about is if you think at some point you might want to develop a specialist interest, are you really interested in something, then actually doing a rotation in that so you can start developing some contacts locally, building networks, that can be quite useful. Just remember that nobody will get exposure to all the specialties that they want or that they need to be a confident GP. All right. So don't worry if you get allocated things that were different to what were your top choices. Ultimately, they have to fill all the rotations, so there's no way to give everyone what they want. All right. But every rotation that you get can be valuable if you have the right approach. Similarly, someone else could get the same rotation as you in the same hospital and take nothing from it because their mindset is poor. Okay. And there's lots of things that you can do to be proactive to get exposure to the specialties that are missing, because you will all be missing things that will help you and that you need to get competent in to be, a great GP once you actually finish. So we'll talk about that. But before we do, let me ask you in the chat, thinking about your first rotation that you start with in August, where do you think it's better to start, hospital or GP? Type into the chat and why. Okay, very interesting. 3/4 picked hospital, 1/4 picked GP. Okay. Again, like rotations, the answer is going to be different for different people. Let me explain why. So I would say that if you have already been working in the UK, you've done foundation, you might have already had a rotation in GP, but you certainly would be familiar with how NHS GP works, because as a medical student, if you trained in the UK, you will have done some primary care rotations. Okay. So if you're familiar with that, then I strongly prefer starting in GP. If you've already got UK experience and are familiar with UK general practice, the reason I would recommend starting in GP is actually if you can do a few months at the beginning of your training in GP when you're already familiar with it and see the kinds of things that you're seeing day to day, when you then do the hospital jobs, it can really help you think, okay, what are the things that I'm going to be asked by patients? What are the kinds of things that I saw a lot of that I could proactively take from this hospital job? Let me give an example. Right? Someone could get allocated orthopedics. Remember, I talked about mindset. You could be allocated that and you could have a fixed or negative mindset. Oh, orthopedics, I'm not interested in that. What relevance is that to a GP? And then what you do is you miss out on learning opportunities. You could have a growth mindset and you could say, okay, you know what? I'm going to see everything as a GP. That's the nature of GP, right? What can I take from this rotation that will help me? Well, you see, if you've already been exposed to GP, you might have had patients that come to you with hip pain, with knee pain, with shoulder pain, and you think, oh, actually, you know what? Seeing how they consented for the operation, the patient often asks me questions about that. They ask, how painful will it be? How much time will I need off work? What's the recovery time? I can start talking about some of these things more confidently. Actually, if I go to clinic and see the patients that have been referred in by GPs and see what are the key questions that the consultant asked them when they've been newly referred, That's going to be useful insight for me to know to write a good referral letter and give the relevant information to know who actually needs to be referred, who might not be, okay? If you have no experience of UK general practice, and if you're completely new to the NHS, then I would recommend that you try to start in hospital. And the reason for that is in GP, you will be on your own in a room at a much earlier stage than in the other specialty. In hospital, you're never really on your own. Okay, any job you do, even if you're on call, there'll be a registrar on call with you. There'll be a consultant available, at least on the end of the phone. In a lot of specialties, like in A&E, there'll always be a consultant on the shop floor. Okay. Also, if you've got no experience of the NHS, you're all familiar, while there's differences in the NHS, you're all familiar with the hospital environment and generally how teams work in hospital and some of the things that you're going to do. In GP, the computer system's completely different. While you get some induction, after the first couple of weeks, because you're in a room on your own seeing patients, if it's all new to you and you don't know the referral pathways and you're still struggling with the computer system and you're not sure what the different roles of different people are, that can be really sort of make you really nervous when there's a patient in the room with you. Okay. So now, ultimately, I'm talking about what, if you get your first choice, in the end, you may prefer one thing and be allocated the other, and you've got to make the most of it no matter what, right? But if you have no experience of UK GP, if you can, starting in hospital, while you're also dealing with living in a new place, getting things like your accommodation sorted and all of those things, and the e-portfolio, at least you're not also trying to then deal with a completely different system that you're no familiarity with. Whereas in hospital, there'll be lots of things that you're still at least familiar with, all right? You know how to do some of the basic tasks, right? Whereas if you've got UK experience, you trained in the UK, you did your medical school here, then if you can start in GP, having that first exposure, when you then do hospital rotations, you can really see what things are going to give me the most benefit. You can get a lot more out of it. But whatever you do, having that growth mindset, that, okay, what can I take from this that will help me be a better GP? Look beyond this rotation. Every job will have lots of service in it. Okay. Work that you have to do, some of which isn't going to give you much benefit. But if you do that and then think, okay, right, if I get that done, now I've got time to go to clinic and learn. But you've got to be proactive. Okay. Good. So let's talk about how to get exposure to other specialties. So you can, do reading. You can do e-learning on places like e-learning for health, which once you've got an NHS email, it's free to access. You could pursue relevant postgraduate diplomas or certificates as a way to learn important knowledge for different specialties. When you are in the GP part of your training, not in hospital, but when you're in the GP part, you get 1 half day each week for self-directed learning. This is not a half day off. It's a half day where you could say to your trainer, look, I don't have any ENT in my rotations, and I've never done ENT since medical school. I've asked the consultant if I can sit in clinic for 1 afternoon a week for the next 6 weeks to get some exposure to ENT. Is that okay with you? And then your trainer will, be happy for you to do something like that. And you could go then and sit in clinic. And then for the next 6 weeks, maybe you could go to obstetrics and gynecology clinic. Then you could go to maybe specifically a HRT clinic. Then you could go to a community peds clinic and see how, they do developmental delay assessments or how they assess people with suspected autism spectrum disorder, things like that, okay? When you're seeing patients during GP posts, you're going to see patients with conditions from all different types of illness, right? So you can read up about the relevant things. And then you can go on specific courses, use your study leave. So, your deanery might run some courses, your trust might run discounted courses. The RCGP has these series of 1-day essential courses. So, recently there was one on cancer. I went on one on an update on men's health, really good courses. When you're an associate in training, you can access these for free. And then we run free GP update webinars every couple of months. We run them in the evening. They're about an hour. Each one, we cover a topic. So, the last one, we covered the recent update to the menopause guidelines. The one before, we did the new asthma guidelines. The one before, different things. Okay. So let's talk about some key things then to do before training. And then I'm going to touch on these things and aim to be doing the Q&A after about 20 more minutes. Okay, so first thing is that you need to confirm and claim your job. Typically, that's via the TRACS website. Okay, then your lead employer may request any references that are outstanding, but they also may request references where you haven't given references covering 3 full years from when you're going to be starting backwards. Because some of you might have given all your references from one job, and that's okay for the application, but your lead employer will want references covering 3 full years. You're going to need to do an enhanced disclosure and barring service. It's an enhanced police check. You need to get through the occupational health, so proof of your different vaccinations. And there's various lead employer forms, and then there's Form R, which has 2 parts. Okay, these are all things that you need to get done before you start training. So now the lead employer form, something really important here, is that your lead employer is not always, and usually is not the same as where you're training. I've already had lots of messages from people. I accepted a job from this area, but I've had this email from St. Helens and Knowsley. That's not what, that's complete. I've looked that up. That's a completely different place. It's miles away. That's because your lead employer just handles your contract and payroll. It's not where you're actually working. It can be somewhere completely different. That's completely normal. Don't worry about that. Okay. In some cases, though, your lead employer may also, because St. Helens and Knowsley is a lead employer for a lot of different deaneries, but it is also a deanery. There are some people who will be both working there and it's their lead employer. In some cases, like if you're in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, your lead employer actually might be the deanery or it might be a health board. Okay. And some trusts are lead employers. Now, the forms that they request, the way that they do it, the format of the email they'll send you, there's a lot of variation based on your lead employer. So I'm going to talk about the generality of some of the things. Okay, so these are some of the common forms and documents that you're going to be asked for. So there's a new starter payroll form, i.e. they need details of your bank details, your previous employment, so that they can make sure you get paid on time. The model declaration form, so there's a training agreement, what your responsibilities are, what you will do, that you will take this seriously, you will let them know about this or that. An information sharing agreement, occupational health forms. That means to upload your UK proof of address. For those of you that are coming from outside the UK, your certificate of sponsorship and evidence of the visa application being in progress. If you've lived outside of the UK in the last 10 years, then an international police check for those countries where you've lived, as well as the enhanced DBS, which is for within the UK. English language competency. So when you applied, you will have selected, for those of you that didn't train in the UK, or where English is the main language, both for patient interactions and for teaching, you will have said whether you had IELTS or OET, or if you've got NHS experience, a letter from a consultant. So they may ask for evidence of this. And then referee details for the previous 3 years. Okay. Again, there's often a checklist that looks like this that they'll give you. Might be slightly different in your lead employer, your deanery, but make sure that you've done everything. And they'll send you an email normally where you'll click a form to fill some of these forms online. And then the others, you just reply to that email and attach the documentation. Okay. Some other things that they might request. If you're been working in the UK in a non-training post, they might ask for a copy of your last appraisal. If you're in a training post, they might ask a copy of your last ARCP. If you've not worked in the NHS, or if you've not had your first NHS appraisal yet, just complete the information based on your last 12 months of clinical experience. You must complete the training agreement, otherwise you will not be able to get authorized to start training. And then 2 really important forms. Form R has got 2 parts, Part A and Part B. The equivalent in Scotland is called TURAS for Part A and SAW for Part B. Okay. For the rest of the UK, it's called Form R, Part A and Part B. Again, there's slight variation by your deanery, but generally within England, you're going to fill in the forms via either TIS or TSS, the Trainee Information Service or the Trainee Information Self-Service. Looks like this. Okay. For Scotland, you'll use a website called TURAS, okay, to fill these things in. There's a guide attached to it. It's really long, but it's got all the information that you need. Please go through the guide. And then if you've got any questions, you need to contact your lead employer for that because it will be specific. But there are some questions that people aren't sure how to fill in for both Form R and Part A and B that I want to go through, like the common things that people get stuck on. So there's a bit where you need to enter on Form R Part A and the equivalent in Scotland for your deanery or HEE local team. This is the area you got your offer from, not your lead employer. Okay. Then there's a bit where it asks you program specialty 1 and program specialty 2. There's only one specialty for both. It's general practice. Training grade, you are all starting at ST1. No one can start at any other grade. Start date is the 6th of August 2025. This should be mentioned in your offer. Okay. And then the post type or appointment is substantive. Again, there's a whole list of other options. People often aren't sure which one. They sometimes pick the wrong one. This is the correct one to pick. Right? Then there's a bit where it asks you to put in, are you going to be training full-time? Or if you're going to be training less than full-time and it's been approved, then to put down the percentage, but they want you to put it as a decimal. Again, sometimes people get a bit stuck on this. So if you're full-time, you put in 1, okay? Because you're training at 100% of full-time, and that as a decimal is 1.0, okay? If you're training at 80%, you don't put 80%, you put 0.8. And if you're doing that, your training will last 45 months, so 3 years and 9 months at 80%, if you do it 80% throughout. Very few people train at 70%, but if you did, it's 0.7 months, and that's 51 and a bit months, 4 years, 3 and a bit months. At 60%, that's 0.6, you'll do 60 months, so it'll take 5 years to complete training, and at 50%, 0.5, it'll take 72 months, so 6 years to complete your training, okay? So, Form R Part B. Again, sometimes people aren't sure if they need to fill this in. You do, okay? Your lead employer will ask you to fill this in. You need to complete it before starting, but Form R Part A, you just fill in before you start. Part B, you fill it in now, but every year before your annual review of competency panel, your ARCP, you'll have to fill it in again with details covering the previous 12 months. So if you're in training in the UK in a different specialty, include information since the last ARCP when you fill in Form R Part B. If you're not in training or if you're not in the UK, include information covering the last 12 calendar months, okay? Then there's a bit that will ask you about your DBS, your UK police check status. So these are the different options. Almost all of you, unless you're already in GP training, are going to be new to this lead employer. So if you're in the UK and you need a new enhanced DBS, select this option. If you're in the UK, but you already have both the certificate and are on the DBS update service, select this one. If you don't know what this is, then you don't have it, okay? If you're not in the UK, most of you are going to pick this one. I'm currently overseas and will need a new DBS when you get to the UK, because there's some bits that you can't fill in until you're here, okay? If you were in the UK and you have a DBS and you're on the update service, and maybe now you went outside the UK and now coming back, i.e. you already worked in the NHS and already have an update service, then you can select this one. This is very few people, okay? So most of you, if you're in the UK, you're going to pick one of these depending on if you're on the update service or not. If you're overseas, most of you are going to pick this option. And then something that I would strongly recommend all of you do once you've applied for DBS is please apply for the DBS update service. It's not expensive. It's £13 a year. But there's a time limit. You can only apply either within 28 days of when you apply. When you apply, you're given a form reference. Or if you don't do it at that point, when the certificate has been issued, you've got 30 days from that time. You need the certificate number. Once you miss that, you can only apply for the update service after you apply for another full DBS, which you'll have to pay for, okay? The main advantage of being on the update service is that, especially, let's say now, you are with your lead employer and they've done your DBS. If you do locums at a different hospital, they will want to do a new DBS because they're not, your lead employer is not your employer if you're doing locums in a different hospital. And so that's another fee, and it takes a long time. It can take several weeks for a DBS to come through. If you're on the update service, you just give them the number and they can just check live online, and it's almost not quite instant, but it speeds it up significantly. And it's such a small cost, it's worth doing, even if you think you might do 1 or 2 locums in the whole year in your first couple of years of training. It also makes it easy if you're just on it when you go from hospital to GP, because in a lot of cases, even though you're with a lead employer, some cases the health board or the individual GP practice will want a new DBS, okay? So let's go through an overview of the structure of GP training and MRCGP, and then I'll tell you about the GPST Plus course, and then we'll have a Q&A. So in most cases, you're going to have somewhere between, most people will have about a year in hospital and 24 months in GP. In some cases, because of the way rotations work and availability of slots, sometimes you end up with somewhere like 16 to 18 months of hospital and the rest being in GP. In some areas, you'll have 4-month rotations. In some areas, you'll have 6-month rotations. Okay. Some of you will do all your hospital in year 1, then GP in year 2 and year 3. Some of you will do some GP and some hospital in both year 1 and year 2. Everyone, year 3 will be full year in GP. Okay. As I mentioned, you may have within your training an innovative scheme or ITP post where you split the week. All of this is deanery specific. So once you get allocated, you'll get the details of that. If you've got questions about that, contact the deanery. Okay. Now, once you're in training, you've got 3 years. It's not automatic that just because you've finished 12 months of time of full-time equivalent training that you go from year 1 to year 2. That's because there's 3 parts of MRCGP. It's a compulsory exit exam to complete GP training and get a certificate of completion in training. The bit that happens all through the 3 years is called workplace-based assessment. So even in the first year, you'll be being assessed in each rotation. There's a whole lot of different assessments that you'll be assessed on, and there's a certain number of things that you need to get signed off at the end of ST1 to successfully progress to ST2. If you don't achieve that, your ST1 year will be extended. If you still don't achieve it by the time of the extension, you may be released from training, which means you'd have to go and do a different specialty. Once you're released from training, you're not usually allowed to apply again for GP in the future. Okay, so it's important that you stay on top of it from year 1 and meet the requirements. The examined parts of MRCGP are AKT and SCA. AKT is the applied knowledge test. And later this year, that's changing to a 160 question exam in 160 minutes for standard timing. 80% of the questions are clinical, 10% are stats and evidence-based practice, and 10% is the administrative and organizational part of GP. You can only sit the AKT once you're in the ST2 year of training or later. You cannot sit it in ST1. And then the SCA is the simulated consultation assessment. Look at this as GP finals. You can only do this when you're in the ST3 year of training, and you will see 12 simulated patients. Each one will be remote. Some will be remote video, some will be remote telephone consultations, and each consultation will last 12 minutes. So you'll have 3 minutes to read their notes. You'll have 12 minutes to do a consultation, to work out a diagnosis, come up with a management plan, explain it, and you'll be assessed on your history taking, your data gathering, your ability to make the right diagnosis, your knowledge of the right management, your ability to explain that, your communication and interpersonal skills, your ability to relate to the patient. All of that's being assessed in all of these 12 cases. And if you score well enough across all 12, you pass. If not, you fail. There's no other options. All right. So you can only sit that in the ST3 year of training, but you should start developing your communication and consultation skills and your clinical knowledge even from year 1, so that you're ready for it by the time you get to year 3. Okay. Now, workplace-based assessment is managed through the e-portfolio. So you have ongoing assessment throughout all 3 years of training. It will start basically from the second week. The first week, there'll be a lot of induction. From the second week of starting training in ST1, you'll be expected to start putting in learning logs into your workplace-based assessment. There's a whole lot of different assessment tools. There's 10 different types of learning logs. There's certain checkpoints that you need to meet at the end of each 6 months and each year to be able to progress to the next year. So these are the different types of assessments that are used. And then there's some newer ones that were introduced more recently that are also going to be used. Some of these happen in all years. Some of these only happen in the 3rd year. Okay. So let me talk to you about then the GPST Plus course and how it can help you. So our GPST Plus course, this has been running for a long time because a lot of people, when they come into GP training, it can be really overwhelming, the fact that the working weeks are different, the contracts are different, there's all these different things to navigate in the e-portfolio. And so, really this course will help you hit the ground running, have a really clear plan of what to expect and how to get through everything. So, for example, in terms of the e-portfolio, we'll cover the 10 different types of learning log, when to use which type, how to write an effective PDP for each rotation. In terms of the assessments, we'll go through all of these assessments, what they are, what does it look like, how many do you need to do each checkpoint, and then we'll actually have a practical exercise on how to write your clinical case reviews, how to write a PDP that's smart. Okay. We'll look at what are the different ARCP outcomes, how to avoid getting into difficulty and getting an adverse outcome. And if you do get an adverse outcome, how to make sure it doesn't progress from just an extension in training to being released from training, which really means the end of your GP career. The MRCGP AKT will look at some sample questions. We'll look at why do people struggle? How do you prepare if you want to get a really good score? When to sit it? The SCA will look at a sample case. We'll look at, again, why do people fail? What are the habits of the really high scorers? What things can you start doing even in the first and second year to get into good habits and good consultation skills? By the time you get into your third year, you can then prepare more focusedly, in a more focused way. We'll look at different courses that you can maybe do during training that are both manageable and will be useful to make you a more attractive candidate and more competitive for jobs once you qualify, okay? And when you might do them. We'll look at the GP registrar contract in detail. So, what will be your salary in hospital, including take-home pay, in hospital, in GP, how much annual leave, study leave, what should be your working week like? Because sometimes people actually, they get either the wrong pay scale or they don't get given all the leave they're supposed to, or their working week hasn't got enough of the education that it should have. And if they don't know it, they don't know to challenge it or to ask about it or just explore it. Okay. We'll also talk about money matters. So how to increase your take-home pay without working any more locum shifts. How to, make sure you claim all the relevant expenses, for example. We'll look at medical legal issues. What are the different reasons that people get complaints from patients for or get referred to the GMC for? And what are the things that lead trainees to get into difficulties in training, and how can you avoid them? We'll look at portfolio GP careers. I recommend everyone develops a portfolio career over time, but some of those things you can start doing during training so that, because you don't become a portfolio GP until after you've got CCT. Similarly, you can't develop a specialist interest until after you've finished GP training. But there are some things that you can do in GP training that will get you a head start. So what are the different things you could have in a portfolio? Why would I recommend it? How do you go about thinking about developing a specialist interest? And then we'll look at how to succeed in GP training. The key things that will help you succeed in training, but also put you into good habits so that you become a great GP. So the live session is going to run on the 5th of July as a global live stream on Zoom. There's also a video recording available. So there's 2 types of ticket. Got a standard ticket, which includes access to the recording for a month. You've got an extended ticket, which includes access to the recording for a year. So I'll show you on our website, the main eMedical website, emedical.co.uk. You'll see it at the bottom here, but you'll also see it here. Okay. So we've got 9:30 to 5:30 on the 5th of July is the live session. And then the standard ticket, you get access to the recording for a month afterwards. If you want to go over the material, the extended ticket, you get access for 12 months, because sometimes people want to look at some of this stuff later on again. All right. Both options, if you book by the 5th of June, i.e. a month before the actual course date, you get the early booking discount, which will save you £55, okay, compared to the standard price. All right. So watch out for that. And then those of you that used eMedica to get into, if you used us for MSRA, we already sent you an email with details of an additional discount that you can get. That's only for people who used eMedica for MSRA already. Okay. Right. Time for the Q&A. All right. Before we do that, let me just cover some really common questions so that people don't have to ask them and it's already answered, because often they get lots of duplicates. So sometimes people want to know, who should I contact if I've got a specific query about one of the forms or about some of the paperwork, if I need it, submit it or not? Your lead employer. That's the answer to that one. Okay. So you contact them and they will tell you the answer to that. Okay. They've got people specifically, that's their role. And then another question people often ask is, how do I send the required documents? So if you reply to the relevant email, you just attach it to that, and then it will be populated into the right place. Some of the forms, though, that are linked to the email that they send you asking you to fill this in, you have to fill them online. Like Form A in some deaneries, it's done on TIS, so you do it online. In some of the forms, they'll send you a form, you fill it in, and then attach it. Okay. And then another common question, what should I do if I'm outside the UK and some of the forms or some of the parts of the forms require UK address? there are some things you can't do before you arrive in the UK. Just complete everything that you can do so that they're only waiting for those few things that require you to physically be in the UK and have a UK address, but also inform your lead employer by email that, look, there's going to be a delay on this bit because I can't do this, okay? And that I'll do this as soon as I arrive, okay? Right, any other questions, put them in the Q&A, and then, like, for those that haven't got questions, really just to say, once again, congratulations on getting into training. I do hope to see you at the GPST Plus course so that you can, be ready to hit the ground running, have a clear plan of every single thing to expect and how to make the most of it before you start. And just to say, really, all of us at eMedica wish you every success in your training. I hope you found today helpful, and I hope to see you. And if you need support, you can always get in touch with us all the way through training and beyond. We help people with careers post CCT as well. Okay, so thank you so much. All the best with the rest of your summer. All the best as you start training. Okay.